Maya and Daniel are both 35. They work for the same company, earn the same $70,000 salary, and save the same $350 from each monthly paycheck. 30 years later, one account is almost $400,000 larger. It is not because Maya picked better stocks. It is not because Daniel panicked and sold. The difference began with one line in their benefits portal that only one of them used. Their company offers a dollar-for-dollar retirement match on the first 6% of pay. Maya sends her $350 a month into the workplace plan, so the company adds another $4,200 each year. Daniel saves the same amount in a separate account, but he never activates the workplace match. Their personal sacrifice is identical. Their starting salary is identical. One stream of money is not. If that extra $4,200 arrives once a year and earns an illustrative 7% annual return, it grows to about $396,700 over 30 years. Rounded, that is the $400,000 gap in the title. It is a projection, not a promise. Markets do not deliver a fixed return, salaries change, and every plan has its own rules. But the mechanism is real. A match creates money that your paycheck alone cannot replace. The snapped cord in the thumbnail is not investment failure. It is compensation that never reached the account. That distinction matters because most people hear retirement gap and blame spending, discipline, or stock selection. Here, the losing worker saved every month. The missing result came from where the saving happened and whether it triggered the employer contribution. Now put yourself at the benefits screen. The page is dense. There are percentages, fund names, tax labels, vesting language, and a button that feels permanent even when it is not. Your rent is due in 4 days. Your car needs tires. 6% of pay does not feel like an elegant financial decision. It feels like less room in the next paycheck. The match feels different because you cannot spend it today. It arrives inside an account designed for a future version of you. Your brain compares a visible loss now with an invisible gain decades later. $350 leaving this month is concrete. $400,000 30 years from now feels like fiction, even when the arithmetic is sitting in front of you. That is the first reveal. The employer match is not merely an investment feature. It is part of the price your employer is willing to pay for your work, but with an activation condition attached. Salary appears automatically. The match often requires you to make the first move. If you never contribute enough to trigger it, the company does not usually send the unused amount into your checking account instead. The IRS describes matching contributions in plain terms. They are employer deposits made when an employee contributes under the plan's formula. The formula and the conditions are found in the plan documents. That means my company has a match is not enough information. The useful question is, exactly how much must you contribute? When is the match deposited? And when does it fully belong to you? Maya reads one sentence. $1 matched for each dollar she contributes, up to 6% of salary. At $70,000, 6% is $4,200 a year, or $350 a month. If she contributes only 3%, she receives only half of the available match. The first 3% is still valuable. The unclaimed 3% is still compensation left behind. Daniel is not careless. He keeps his savings liquid because liquidity feels safe. He can see the balance, reach it during an emergency, and avoid retirement account restrictions. Those are legitimate concerns. The mistake is not wanting accessible cash. The mistake is treating emergency savings and the employer match as if they perform the same job. Cash protects the next surprise. A retirement match changes the long horizon. One should not automatically replace the other. If contributing enough for the full match would leave you unable to pay rent, food, minimum debt payments, or a basic emergency, the spreadsheet does not get to shame you. Financial safety begins with staying functional. But once a small contribution is possible, the match deserves to be evaluated as compensation, not as optional decoration. Look at the timeline. After the first year, the difference is only $4,200 plus whatever it earned. That does not look life-changing. At year 3, the employer deposits total $12,600 before growth. A broken transmission can still feel more important than the entire match account. This is where many rational people stop, because the future benefit still looks smaller than present-day risk. At year 10, the extra employer stream has grown to roughly $58,000 under the same 7% illustration. Now the gap is large enough to represent a meaningful emergency fund, a period away from work, or several years of future housing costs. Yet it arrived quietly. There was no dramatic payday. It accumulated through repeated deposits that each looked too small to matter. At year 20, the employer-only stream is around $172,000. More than half of that gap is no longer the original employer deposits, it is growth on earlier deposits. Time has started doing more work than the latest contribution. The first dollars had 2 decades to compound. The dollars never deposited had 0 years. At year 30, the gap reaches roughly $397,000 in this simplified example. Maya and Daniel each saved their own $350 a month. Both accounts may have grown. The title does not claim one person has $400,000 and the other has nothing. It says one finishes roughly $400,000 ahead because an additional match stream was allowed to compound beside the worker's own saving. That is the second reveal. Missing a match is not one lost deposit. It is a lost deposit plus every future return that deposit might have earned, repeated across every eligible paycheck. The visible decision happens once in the benefits portal. The financial consequence keeps renewing itself. This also explains why starting later is difficult to repair. Suppose Daniel notices the match after 10 years. From that point forward, he makes the same contribution as Maya and receives the same employer deposit. He has fixed the leak. But the first 10 years of employer money are still missing, and those were the dollars with the longest runway. To recreate the same final employer-funded balance over only 20 years, he would need a much larger annual contribution than the original $4,200. Catching up is possible, especially when income rises, but it is not free. Delay converts time into a bill that future cash flow must pay. The psychology behind the delay is not stupidity. Enrollment creates friction. Percentages hide dollar amounts. Fund menus create fear of choosing wrong. Job turnover makes the future feel temporary. Some workers believe they should wait until debt is gone, life is stable, or they understand investing perfectly. The decision keeps moving to a calmer month that never arrives. There is also a painful asymmetry. If you choose the wrong investment mix, you can usually change future contributions. If you miss a match for a past year, you normally cannot travel backward and trigger it after the opportunity has closed. Uncertainty about a reversible choice can cause an irreversible delay. This is where free money becomes a dangerous phrase. It is memorable, but it can sound like a sales pitch. The match is not free in the sense of having no conditions. You may need to contribute. The money may be subject to a vesting schedule. Withdrawals may have tax consequences and plan restrictions. Your investments can rise or fall. The accurate idea is conditional compensation with long-term growth potential. Vesting deserves special attention because the balance shown on a screen is not always the amount you can keep when you leave. Some employer contributions belong to you immediately. Others become yours gradually after a period of service. Your own contributions remain yours, but unvested employer money may be forfeited if you leave too soon. The plan's summary description tells you which rule applies. Consider Elena, a supporting case with a different constraint. She earns the same $70,000 and contributes enough to receive the full match, but she expects to change jobs in 18 months. Her plan uses a vesting schedule that would leave part of the employer contribution unvested at departure. The headline math cannot simply be pasted onto her life. Elena should still read the formula rather than assume the match is worthless. She needs 3 dates: when she becomes eligible, when each contribution is credited, and when employer money vests. A job change delayed by a few weeks could matter. So could a new employer with a stronger plan. The match is one part of total compensation, and vesting changes its effective value. That leads to the third reveal. 2 jobs with the same salary are not necessarily the same financial offer. One may include a meaningful match, immediate vesting, and low-cost investment choices. Another may offer no match, delayed eligibility, or expensive funds. The paycheck number is only the visible layer of compensation. A $5,000 salary difference can attract all the attention because it appears in every paycheck. A $4,200 annual match can be ignored because it appears behind a login. But both change your economic position. One is cash now. The other is restricted future compensation. Comparing jobs without both numbers is like comparing rent while ignoring utilities. You do not need a complicated retirement model to stop missing the mechanism. Use one simple tool: the match capture number. It is the smallest percentage and dollar amount you must contribute from each paycheck to receive every employer dollar currently available under your plan. Start with the exact formula, not a guess from a coworker. A plan might match dollar for dollar up to a percentage of pay. It might contribute 50 cents per dollar up to a limit. It might use tiers. Write the actual rule in one sentence. Then calculate the employee contribution required to reach the maximum employer deposit. For Maya, the match capture number is 6%, or $4,200 per year. If she is paid monthly, that is $350 from each paycheck. If she is paid every 2 weeks, the per paycheck amount differs. The percentage is usually the cleaner control because it adjusts when pay changes. Next, compare the match capture number with your current contribution. If the gap is 0, you are capturing the available match. If the gap is 2 percentage points, you know the exact missing trigger. A vague intention to save more later becomes a measurable distance. Then check the cash flow floor. Do not increase a contribution blindly if it would create overdrafts, missed essentials, or new high-interest debt. If the full gap is too large, ask whether you can close it in steps. 1 percentage point now, another after a debt payment ends, and another after the next raise. The purpose is to build a path, not manufacture guilt. Finally, record the vesting rule beside the contribution rule. 6% for full match, fully vested after 2 years, is more useful than good 401k. The first sentence can guide a paycheck decision and a job decision. The second is only a feeling. There is one more trap: stopping at the default enrollment rate without checking the match. Automatic enrollment can help people begin, but the default contribution percentage is not guaranteed to equal the amount required for the full employer match. Enrollment solves inaction. It does not always solve optimization. If your default is 3% and the full match requires 6%, you may feel responsible because money is leaving every paycheck. You are saving. You may even be invested appropriately. But half the available employer stream can still remain inactive. A good default is a starting point, not proof that the compensation has been fully captured. The same applies after a raise. If your contribution is set as a percentage, the dollar amount often rises with pay. If it is set as a fixed dollar amount, it may fall below the new percentage needed for the full match. A salary increase can quietly create a new gap unless you review the setting. None of this means the matched plan should consume every financial priority. High-interest debt, unstable housing, medical needs, and a missing emergency buffer are real constraints. Personal finance becomes harmful when it pretends every household has the same order of operations. The honest question is not whether the match is always first. It is whether you understand the exact price of leaving it unused. For Maya, the price is visible across 30 years. $4,200 of employer money per year becomes nearly $400,000 under the stated illustration. For Daniel, keeping savings accessible may have solved a real short-term need. Once that need changes, continuing to ignore the match becomes a different decision. The emotional payoff is not that you should panic over every missed contribution. Past years are closed, but the next eligible paycheck is not. The most useful moment is not the first day of your career. It is the first day you see the mechanism clearly enough to act within your real constraints. Open the plan document. Find the matching formula. Find the vesting rule. Calculate the match capture number. Then decide whether your current contribution reflects your priorities or merely the default you inherited. If the document is hard to read, send one narrow question to the plan administrator. What contribution percentage gives me the maximum employer match, and when is that match fully vested? You are not asking for an investment recommendation. You are asking for the operating rule of your compensation. A precise answer can replace an hour of clicking through fund pages without knowing what you are trying to activate. Then put a recurring reminder beside one event you already notice, such as an annual raise or open enrollment. Recheck the formula, your contribution percentage, and the vesting rule. Plans change. Jobs change. Pay changes. A 10-minute review keeps an old default from making a new decision on your behalf. The goal is not to monitor the account every day. It is to make sure the cord between your work and the employer contribution has not quietly snapped. The retirement gap may look like an investing story, but it begins as a compensation story. Same salary, same personal saving. One extra stream activated, then given time. That is how a line most people barely notice can become the difference between two very different futures. What percentage of your employer match are you capturing right now? All of it, part of it, or none yet. You do not need to share a balance. Just knowing the percentage can turn an invisible benefit into a decision you actually control.